So as much as anything, whether we want to use BCAs or not, we're going to have to, because there's no new chemistries coming along. Next slide, please. So, but one of the comments I get from growers is, yeah, but isn't using BCAs too hard? Well, 99% of New Zealand tomatoes growers are already using biologicals. I suspect there'll be nobody here who isn't using bumblebees as a primary pollination tool. And few of any of our current growers would remember what you used to have to do to pollinate tomatoes before bumblebees came along. But anytime, if you know any Aussie growers, have a chat to them. And they'll tell you all about it, and they'll tell you the time it takes, and they'll tell you the money that it costs them to do their pollination. So BCAs for pest control are just another step down the bumblebee line, right? So where should we start with our BCA control journey? Next slide, please. Lesson number 1. A good place to start is understanding the pests that you're trying to control. Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so understand the way that pests damage your crop. Understand the life cycle of the pests. Understand where the pests live on your plant. Understand what signs of the pests look like on the plant. The eggs and the adults, the developing scale and the pupa, and where they are on your plant. So if you understand where the pests are, it gives you an idea of where you need to be targeting your resources to controlling them. Next slide, please. And for example, whitefly's got approximately 20 days in its life cycle, and we need to have different methods of control depending on whereabouts in the life cycle we're trying to operate. Next slide, please. So lesson number 2, make sure that you advise your nursery that you're planning to use BCAs. You need to advise your nursery that they should discuss the use of any chemical treatments on your plants prior to using them. We're not saying that you can't use chemicals. We're just saying they need to understand that you're using BCAs and that will have some impact once those plants arrive in their glass houses. Number 2, the same care that you're taking for your plants for your BCAs is the same care that you should be taking for your plants for your bumblebees. Because if they put insecticides on in your glass houses there's a fair chance it's going to hurt your bees as well as it is any beneficials you're going to introduce. Next slide, please. So discussions you need to have with your plant suppliers. So you just need to let your plant supplier know that they're planning to use BCAs in your crops and that they shouldn't use sprays without consulting with you. Some chemicals at the nurseries may continue to be active in the new plants once they've been in your greenhouses, and this may harm your beneficial insects. And for example, and thanks again to Chris Thompson for this, at the bottom we've got Incarcia, Formosa. There's a range of different chemicals across the top there, and then there's a schedule on the side there that says what sort of impact that's going to have on your plants. And for example, abamectin in the pupa stage, basically no effect, but on your Incarcia. But if you do it at the adult stage, it'll have a significant effect on your Incarcia in your glasshouse. So what we're talking about here and what we're trying to achieve is just making sure that people that are not within your glasshouse understand that you're using BCAs, and this will impact on the way that they treat plants coming into you. Next slide, please. So lessons 3, 4, and 5. The earlier you introduce BCAs into your crop, the better they will be at reducing the impact of pest incursions. Lesson number 4, supplementary feeding will help maintain the BCA populations. And some growers have questioned whether spending money on BCAs when you don't have pests seems like a waste. What we think is consider this as an insurance policy, or somebody else I've heard say like a guard dog in your crop for when the potential pests come in. Next slide, please. How and when to introduce beneficial insects. It's best, as we mentioned in the earlier slide, to build your BCA population up at the time that you plant. Waiting until you see pests in your crop actually runs the risk that population is going to be beyond what you're going to introduce into the glasshouse in the first place. This acts as an immediate defence if and when pests arise, and your BCA supplier will actually be able to help you, advise you with the quantities, location, and timing of applications. The quantity and the frequency of additional BCA introductions will be determined by both beneficial and pest insect populations. Now, one of the things that came up in this project is we're learning all these things, but how can we share what we're learning with growers? And there's a couple of ways of base ways that go to be doing it. One of them has been, I think, 5 videos that have done to date. One of them on whiteflies has been released, and I think the other 4 are available, Dinah, now on the Tomatoes New Zealand and the ALT website. And for one of them, it's kind of like how-tos, okay? If you want to use these beneficials or in your glasses, this is our suggestion as to how to do it. So can Dinah, can you just play this? This one is the one on how to use Ingitatus.
Hi, my name's Andrew. Today I'm here to explain how to use Ingitatus, a native mirrored bug that we're developing as a beneficial insect that specialises in controlling tomato potato psyllid, or TPP, and is also an excellent whitefly predator. Today I'll show you how to effectively use Ingitatus with banker plants to combat whitefly while preparing for TPP in your greenhouse. First, immediately after planting, we need to place banker plants. In this case, they are tobacco plants because Ingitatus can complete a full life cycle on them. Tobacco plants are spread throughout the crop. They're spaced to cover about 100 square metres each. We aim for a minimum of 9 banker plants per 1,000 metres squared. These banker plants serve as reservoirs, providing a continuous supply of Ingitatus that will disperse throughout the greenhouse without help. After letting the Ingitatus establish themselves on the banker plants for a while, we can add more adults or feed them an artificial high-protein food source. This will speed up their establishment. They will hunt out to about 10 metres from the banker plant. Once the crop scouts start to notice any food species like whitefly, psyllids or aphids, break off a leaf or flower from the banker plant and transfer it to a hotspot. The Ingitatus will then feed on the local aphids and whitefly and multiply, but their preferred food source is TPP. Think of them as your TPP guard dogs. With Ingitatus and banker plants on your side, you can effectively prepare your greenhouse for a TPP invasion as part of your whitefly management program. For more information on scouting and other IPM tips, check out our other videos in the series.
Thank you. Andrew will be doing autographs and sharing pictures with you and him on his gram page at the end of the conference that we're having today. And we actually have another, but I'd like to thank particularly those volunteers that were brave and bold enough to put themselves forward and to share these learnings that we're having, you know. So lesson number 6. I spoke before about talking with your crop consultants and your BCA supplier about when and how to introduce beneficials in your glasshouse. And one of the really critical things about this is regular and accurate scouting is needed to understand both the population and the distribution of pests and BCAs in your crop. And for bigger growers, I understand you generally have people that are paid to do this full time, but for smaller growers, they do this as just part of their day-to-day work as they go through their crop. So training your staff and getting, you know, it's one of those jobs, the more sets of eyes and the more people you have interested in doing these things in your glasshouse, the better information you're going to get fed back and the better decisions you're going to be able to make with what you do. Next slide, please. Now, lesson number 7 is that BCAs are not like traditional chemical sprays. Actually, I say that they're not knockdowns, but a lot of traditional chemical sprays aren't knockdowns these days either. But, you know, BCAs don't 100% eliminate pests. You need some pests to allow the BCAs to survive. And BCAs suppress the pest population so as to minimise the economic impact and crop damage. What they don't do is completely eliminate the pests in your crop. I used this graph last year to show what it's all about is actually maintaining your pest at a level where it's below your economic damage threshold in the glasshouse. And this was a graph of comparing biocontrol with traditional chemical control. And you can see that the biocontrol managed to keep the pest levels down below that damage threshold line throughout the crop. Now, to be fair, and I will upgrade this graph for next time, the last 8 to 10 weeks, that blue line did get up towards that back line, did pass it, but then as the BCA population built up, it knocked them down below the line again, okay? So, you'll notice there was also always on the graph, it was never at 0. There's always some pests in your crop. And that's kind of a mindset I think as growers now that we have to understand is that if you want to go down the biological path, you are going to have some of the bad guys there at the same time. Next slide, please. So beneficial insects may require some help. So surfactants such as soaps and oils will also help as barriers with pest incursions. Mechanical interventions, I noticed on the fruit fed display at the back there, the yellow sticky traps and those sorts of things. Vacuum systems will also reduce your pest numbers. From time to time, you will also have to use some chemical interventions. Soft sprays can target specific pests and cause little or no harm to your BCAs. But before using any sprays, just like talking with your nurseries, your plant nurseries, you need to discuss with your crop advisors and your BCA suppliers to check to see whether they can cause harm. You need to be very careful when using hard and non-selective sprays. This may result in you not being able to use BCAs for quite some time. Another one of the little videos we've got, again starring Andrew, is how to deal with spot pests. The video, please.
Hi, I'm Andrew. Today we're treating spot pest infestations picked up by our scouts. I'll guide you through how we handle spot infestations of various pests. We won't be covering whiteflies as this has been covered in another video. The usual suspects are tomato potato psyllids or TPP, russet mites, caterpillars, aphids and scarab flies. Common pests that can wreak havoc on your IPM system if left unchecked. There is an action card available for each one from Tomatoes New Zealand. So we'll just go through the highlights. This area has been attacked by TPP. You can see the sugars on the leaves and the juveniles. For psyllids, we should have introduced Injectatus as part of our whitefly program, and they hopefully removed or limited the TPP infestation. Treatment will range from sticky traps and a spot spray for a one plant infestation, all the way to chemical intervention if it's a large infestation. Here we see some russet mite damage. The mites themselves are too small for us to see unaided. Currently, the treatment for these ranges from a spot spray with a physical for smaller areas, all the way to treating the whole site with a soft chemical intervention. Caterpillars are obvious by their damage and visible presence. Your best bet is to use pheromone traps to catch or confuse the moths before they even lay eggs. Failing that, there are good options including picking them off if it's just a few, all the way to treating the whole site with repeated Bacillus thuringiensis sprays, or even harder chemistry if required. The next spot pest is aphids. Normally obvious because they totally coat the head of a single plant and radiate outwards. Aphids can be controlled by several of our predators, depending on the situation. Generally, we recommend a combination of lacewings and aphidius. You can even spot spray first with a physical to slow them down, and if you've left it a bit late, the more extreme measures include whole site physical sprays or even soft chemistry. And lastly for today, we have scarab flies. It's the juveniles on the roots that do most of the real damage. We deploy soil-borne predatory mites like hypermite early in the crop to prevent these and recommend their introduction at any stage. If things are much worse, we would start to do weekly drenching with a suitable Bacillus thuringiensis product until they're under control. Since we're in an IPM system, we must be careful not to treat one pest incorrectly and risk upsetting the entire system. Generally, physical sprays are your best bet if you want to act immediately, but the predators are your best long-term solution. As always, scout regularly and act quickly. Spot infestations can spread rapidly, so it's crucial to address them as soon as they're detected. If you want to learn more about how to scout correctly, watch our scouting video, which talks you through the best practices.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, everybody. Okay, now just when you do a presentation like this is a moving beast and new things are coming through all the time. After I'd put this presentation together, I was reminded about a few other things that we've been talking about and had been issues that had come up in the process. So I don't have slides to talk about a couple of things, but there are a couple of points I'd like to raise. And one of the issues that we've found happening with using the use of BCAs is that some of the minor pests or some of the things that traditionally haven't been major issues for growers are starting to rear their heads again, because you're not putting sprays in to nuke everything that's in the glasshouse. You're putting biologicals in to control some specific pests. And so one of the things that we are finding is things like russet mite, things like spider mite, and that are starting to become more problems. And we will build resources to help you with those things as they come and go. So this is not the information we guys got for you. We have for you today is not an endpoint. It's just part of the journey as we're coming along. And one of the things that came up again was just brought to my attention the other day, something you should all be doing, is try to keep pests out of glass houses as much as you can. Don't make it easier for them. If you've got sheets of cracked or broken glass, fix them, replace them, repair them. You'll stop the pests coming in. Keep your doors, your external doors closed. Those sort of little simple housekeeping things that all good growers should do as part of their best practice, they should be doing as part of this BCA project. And something else about using BCAs is patience. All right, it's not like something like where you get a new spray that's just come to the market, you put it in, bang, go in there, next day they're all laying on the backs with their feet kicking in the air. That's the end of the problem. Use of BCAs isn't like that. You've got to remember you're dealing with a natural process and not everything may go as you plan. Glasshouses that have high levels of technology have more tools to help to manage the environment, but it hasn't stopped some of our lower tech and our small growers having really good success with using BCAs. So it can be used across the whole industry. Every grower's got a different environment, different outside influences and different tolerance levels. There will be some situations where conventional pest control may be the most effective option for you. This project is not about saying don't use chemicals. It's about having an integrated pest management tool or system where we use all the tools that are available to us. Next slide, please. I'd just like to talk just a little bit about what the Elida Touch project is. So it's a multi-year research project that's been currently undertaken to determine which BCAs are the most effective and how best to use them. So the first couple of years, we've done work with Engitatus where yes, it does, it will take out psyllids. Yes, it does. If there's no psyllids around, it'll clean whitefly. But what we're now starting to do, the direction was how do we best use them? How do we supplementary feed them when there's no TPP around? Those sorts of things. And I think that's going to be one of the areas where as we go on in the next year or two, we'll have more information about. I think we've proved at the moment that they can be successful, but we're now learning how to use them the best and the most effectively. Both large, high-tech and small family owned growers are participating in this project. Not every trial has been 100% effective on all pests, but all are showing positive results. So we're learning something from every site that we're working with. In the last increase, in particular, and the thing's been the most pleasing to me, is there's been quite an uptake by our growing community into using BCAs. Whether this has been driven by their moral ethics and keeping the world safe and clean and green, or it's being driven by the fact that the sprays aren't working much anymore, I personally don't care. Okay, what I do care about is our industry is heading in the right direction and we're building ourselves a more sustainable future. A number of resources are being developed that'll help you with your BCA and your IPM journey. We've got these videos here, and for the growers that are present, we've got some IPM folders that are here, and you're all welcome to take those away. And these have got the action cards that we've been developed in this. The work to be done in the future, well, we already know we need some more action cards. We talk about spraying in the heads. Well, spraying in the heads with soaps and things like that is quite a different process than bombing your plants with insecticides. And so not only just saying to growers you need to spray the heads is not good enough. So we're developing and some action cards to tell you how to correctly set up your sprayer to do that job in your glasshouse. Hygiene between plantings and green bridge management, right, is another area that's really important as to what we're doing. And I'm sure with our friends from the seed companies, these sorts of techniques of hygiene and that we're developing within our glasshouses for our BCAs will also be incredibly beneficial for the risk of spreading other diseases in your glasshouses as well. And one of the things I'd like to ask today and to toss out to you guys today, and you can either bring it up when we have the discussion group here in a moment, is are there any particular pests or issues that you guys are having problems with in your glasshouses that you would like the Elida Touch people to have a look at and give you some feedback and come up with some ideas and some potential solutions for you? And feel free to speak if you don't want to speak here in the meeting. Speak to myself or Diane or any of the other people. Probably Andrew would be the man to talk to about any things that you'd like us to have a look at. Lastly, I would just like to acknowledge and thank everybody that's been involved in this project. There's a fair bit of mucking around and farting around and collecting information and sharing. There's a few people have had to, drop their trousers a bit and let us have a look at what's going on in their operations, but we're learning from that. And I'd really like to acknowledge those people. So the team at Elida Touch, the growers that are taking part in the research, we couldn't get these learnings and share these learnings without those people doing this work. And lastly, but not least, I'd actually like to thank Emiliano and the team at Lincoln University that did the original work with Angiotatus and actually got us up and on our way to get this project going. So that's where we're at. We're a fair way down the road. Still got a way to go, but there's, in my opinion, at least, there's a lot of positive things coming out of what we're doing. Thank you.
Thanks, Lex. We're going to have a panel discussion now, so I'd like to invite up David Wang, Chris Cowie, and Anthony Tringham. Lex, why don't you stay?
Oh, and Chris Thompson too, if we could.
Chris Thompson,
yeah,
sorry,
yeah.
Chris. Yep. Okay.
Oh, there you go.
So thanks, guys.
You hold that.
Before we go to questions, is there any comments any of you would like to make at this stage?
Hi, everyone. If you've got a good working IPM program, what you want to be thinking about is using the green bridge to your advantage. So I plant a crop in winter, and by the end of the next winter, ideally what you see is a crop that's chock-a-block full of Angiotatus and good beneficials. So what you don't want to do is to kill all those before the next crop comes in. So in the olden days, what you used to do was to maybe do a whole lot of nasty chemicals at the end of your crop in case you had pests you wanted to kill. Whereas now what you want to do is you want to keep them alive. And so particularly where we have tobacco plants, the plants are 2 meters tall and the flowers are just full of Angiotatus. So what we do is we take those tobacco plants out, put them in another greenhouse because they're full of good bugs. And then when we plant the new crop, we bring the old tobacco plants straight into the new crop. So it's like a green bridge, but a good green bridge.
Does that put you out of business?
Not yet.
Okay, sounds a good idea. So to start with questions, one question for me, do we have enough tools in our toolbox, biological toolbox? So years ago, we put so much effort as an organisation into trying to import Macrolophus and didn't succeed. The EPA didn't approve it. We then, as a result of Emiliano's good work in Lincoln University, went down a different pathway and looked at identifying the beneficials that were already here. So do we have sufficient beneficials, or do we need to go back to thinking about finding more?
I think we have enough options. We just need to learn how to use them properly. So that's the process we're really going through, is how understanding how these bugs actually work in our monoculture crops and how to get them breeding with banker plants and how to scout and all those things. I think we've got the tools now. We don't need to go and find Macrolophus now. We've got it. We just need to learn how to do it.
We'll talk about lacewings and fire bugs.
Yeah, there's a few other ones that weren't shown in here, like lacewings and pirate bugs, which have been more commonplace in the potatoes and capsicums things. So there's plenty of things out there that'll eat psyllids. The next lot of research will probably be more around the things like russet mite, which are still a big problem in Europe. And we've been, thankfully enough, had an intern from Wageningen for the last 4 or 5 months here, and we've started to join forces with her professor to look at a few options for that as well.
Cool. Yes, John.
Bloody difficult. Who brought him along?
Security?
I don't know,
Security.
but I'm going to side with Barry here. I do ask the question about having a conversation with someone who's been in the crosshairs of MPI in the past few years. We've got organisms in New Zealand that could be helpful to us, and sometimes regulations are very, very slow to change. So Dicyphus was mentioned by a certain grower, and that mention was dealt to quite quickly. The story is yeah, a little bit interesting and may be told later. But I don't think we should be happy with what we've got. Chris, I like your enthusiasm, but any one of these good guys can have its own natural enemies and diseases, and I think we should have some options. So the question I'd have is maybe to Lex, can we readdress the question to EPA of what's happening with the denewing of Dicyphus and other things that are probably sitting out there?
Yeah, look, I agree with what you're saying. I'm not sure whether that fits, where that fits with a lighter touch. So that's my only but I agree. If we've got something that we know is out there and we know could potentially do the job for us, and it's a technical regulation that's stopping our exploring of how to use that beneficial within our environment, then we need to have a look or question the regulation to see whether it's still valid and current in the right time. Anthony.
My experience with the investigators is that they weren't entomologists and they wouldn't have known the difference between a cricket and a whitefly. And so if we actually want something, we could give it another name, like we could call it, just make up another name that they're not even going to look at, and then that'll be our code name for our special bug.
I think that one's been tried. I think that was tried before with a certain imported bug that came to New Zealand, and I'm not sure how that one gets. I think we're better to look at the rules.
Yeah, well, that is one thing with the rules. When a pest comes, say like harlequin ladybird or psyllids, sometimes they try and eradicate it, but if that's deemed too hard, it gets its passport stamped straight away. If a good bug arrives, it's a whole big court fight to get that thing allowed to stay, because they want it to be killed as well. They're like, oh, hopefully it'll just die out naturally. But eventually, like sometimes some good things do actually arrive here, surprisingly few compared to the bad ones. And that's something that maybe needs to be addressed with the regulators, to take some of the reins off the good ones.
Yeah, so thanks for raising those points. And I don't know if it fits in a lighter touch either, but it's something we can follow up on and look at what the avenues available to us are. Cool, thank you. Other questions? Yes.
Maybe for you, Lex, can you talk to us about what the cost parameters are per hectare per annum of, say, moving from chemical control of something like whitefly to an integrated pest management, setting it up and then maintaining it?
We'll have some better information on that next year. So we've currently got one site that we're working on where we had last year primarily chemical control, this year primarily BCA control, and we're going to compare those at the completion of this current crop cycle. So it's the issue with that from a general perspective, this is just too many variables between the different growers to be able to have hard and fast things, because different growers have different tolerance levels. Different growers have different environments, they have different labour models, that sort of thing. But what we will be able to do is compare a site from the 2023 crop, the 2023-24 crop to the 24-25 crop, and be able to give you some indications with that.
Do you lean any way at the moment? Less expensive, horrendously more expensive? What insight do you even have then? If you're financially planning something, budgeting for it, what would you lean to that?
I would, from my experience, it's the consequences of the chemical control not working that I factor in to the BCA making a lot more sense as well. Like, I don't mind spending, even if I spend more on BCAs than I did on chemical spray, I'm actually seeing the BCAs actually starting to work, which is improving tag percentage, volume. We even see results in labour reductions. So for me, that investment in BCAs is to do with the outcome as well.
Yeah, and one of the comments that I've heard and made is that staff would far rather be going out there scouting for insects, introducing beneficials and that sort of thing, than they would be suiting up. Gloves on, masks on, suits on, stinking hot days spraying. So is there a hard and fast, if you go conventional chemical, it's going to cost you $2 a metre, and if you go BCA, it's going to cost you $1.50. I'm not sure whether we'll get that sort of result, but we will be able to give you some guidelines as to say, these are the positives that we got out of it as well.
Thank you. Is there any other observations on that question? Because I suppose the other dynamic here that I think of is that we're losing our chemical options, and the effectiveness is not there, and it's not going to be too long before we don't have the choice anyway. So, and I suppose that in light of the question, if you're unsure and you haven't used them and you've got a few houses, the way in, is it best to start with one house and convert that way? Or how would you recommend, if you've got, say, 4 different sheds that you're not using any biologicals in, but you're not sure about biologicals, what's the way into it?
I would be cautionary about, if you've got, say, 4 buildings on one site but only one spray rig, about running 2 systems. You'd have to be very careful of your spray choices, because if you haven't washed it out thoroughly and you're using hard chemicals on the other sides, that you're just going to repel all the beneficials from your trial house. But the what we've seen in a lighter touch and some built sites with multiple houses on there was the Incasia was escaping from the trial house and controlling the whitefly in the conventional house. So, and that led to him doing less spraying on the other side. So there's just a few factors that you probably want to get in touch with around knowing what you can spray and what your nursery can spray before you receive your plants to get going.
Yeah, one of the more interesting things that we saw in one of the trials, which is where we had 2 houses side by side, one using conventional and one using BCAs, was my normal experience as a grower was that within your houses, immediately inside the door was the place where you had the greatest whitefly. But this one actually worked the other way around. The place inside the door in the chemically controlled house, we actually had the least whitefly, and that's because of the Incasia was coming in from the trial house, getting into the glass house and providing more effective control than the chemical spray was in that house.
Cool. Simon.
Yeah, for Chris, we talked about the residual effect of sprays of seedlings coming from the nursery. The half-life of some of those chemicals, is it days or is it weeks or is it months?
Yeah, it depends on the chemical. So things like Karate Xeon, you're talking 4 months. For echinacea, I forget which product that's in, you're looking 6 months. So Whereas if you had transform, which we'd consider a hard chemical, it's 2 or 3 weeks. So it's yeah, it's huge variations out there.
And one other question. One of the great things about a lighter touch was we had Emiliano who went out, and I understood, not discovered, but made a list of more than 40 predator insects that were native species. There's probably more. Are we making any plans to have another crack at that and locate and discover more of those native species? Because clearly that's a pretty good solution.
So there is background work being done on that with Plant and Food and us and Lincoln. You have to remember that Plant and Food is funded very differently these days, and the entomology department gets a bit less than 50 cents to run on. So there's not enough funding in that, if that's what you're getting at. There's very little focus going on it financially, but there is quite a number of teams battling away at it, pretty underfunded. Yeah. I like the sound of the funding.
Okay, question down the back.
Yeah, if you look at sort of the Australian landscape, you see pretty much every large scale grower using IPM. And, you know, there's certainly been a lot of mid-sized growers that are using it also, to the point that one of our customers was proudly telling me about his IPM regime. And then later in the conversation, I realized that he'd actually just inherited it from his next door neighbor who was using IPM. I don't know enough about it to know whether it's a completely different landscape in terms of what you can actually use in New Zealand versus Australia. But I was wondering, you know, is there opportunities for more collaboration, given that it's so widespread there in its adoption? And also, yeah, whether there's more kind of, yeah, do you have completely different bugs? And can you, to the question that was asked earlier, use some of the costings that they've maybe already had in place for some years to make the comparisons financially?
So we do have like business to business collaborations with the Australian producers, and we have for about 20 years or more. It's not exactly apples for apples of what's in Australia and what's in New Zealand, especially on species levels. So in tomatoes in particular, they're using Nasidia chorus, which if you ask the Dutch person about that, they would throw you off their site. But if you ask tomato growers in Asia, that's all they have as well. We don't have Nasidia chorus here. I don't think anyone would ever want it here as well. And not from what I've heard from our customers in Malaysia either. But on a pricing structure, it's if you look around the globe, it's all actually on a pretty even keel, unless you're in Africa where things are actually real cheap.
David, would you like to just overview what your involvement is with biologicals?
Yeah, I use the biological for a couple of years now. Yeah, I found that's very useful for your yield. You not use too much hard spray, then your plants will be more present to have the setting ability.
Good. Thank you.
I will continuously to use.
That's good to hear. Thank you. Other questions?
Sorry, I'm not sure. Is Callum still around?
Callum's online.
He's still online.
Yeah.
So one of the more interesting things that we did was some work with Callum, where we used lacewing and pirate bugs. Yeah, lacewing and pirate bugs as a spot hit for psyllid incursions. And I'm not sure whether he's able to tell us anything about that. Can't? Okay. I'll speak on his behalf, sort of, if I can, is that what he did find was using those as spot interventions for psyllid incursions significantly reduce those psyllid populations into his glass houses
Great.
to the extent that it was controllable.
Hmm.
Yeah. So here today, I spoke mostly about Edgitatus and Incarcia, but there is work being done on some other things as well, just not quite to the same extent. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, I've got a question. So one thing you do differently as a grower, starting your biological journey. So is there anything you would do differently, David, from what you had done if you had another go at it tomorrow?
You mean
Did you learn from a mistake that you wouldn't make that same mistake next time with biologicals?
yeah, the only thing is you do need use transform. Kill your bugs. Yeah.
That's a good lesson, absolutely.
Yeah. When you do the spray, you need to have a look what kind of chemical you can spray.
So understanding the
Yeah.
chemicals and absolutely critical.
Yeah.
Thank you.
For me, when we first started using Incarcia, it was that communication with the nursery, receiving plants and not knowing that they've done karate Xeon on it, and then ringing up Chris in a panic saying, your Incarcia don't work, what's going on? You just need to communicate with your nursery to make sure that you can agree on what to put on the plants and if it's actually worth them doing or not. Or we can just say I can accept a little bit more tolerance on the pests that might come on the plants.
Sorry. If I could just add one too, and that is introducing beneficial insects at the time that you plant your crop. So having building up a defensive force, building up a defensive area or an insurance policy before you think you need it, because the pest that's cleaned up by a beneficial that you never see is the one that stops the population building in your glasshouse.
Hi, because we've been using biological controls for many years now, and generally a successful season means there's no whitefly spraying at all, you tend to get a little bit casual and I start to wing it. And so I've got, yeah, no, you wouldn't believe it. And so I've got two houses side by side and I was feeling lazy. So one house I put the tobacco plants in and one house I didn't put the tobacco plants in. And there were far more problems in the no tobacco house. So it's worth putting a bit of effort in to make this work, but it's not, it's less hassle than spraying, I can assure you.
No, I think you summed it up quite well. But a lot of people like get caught up on oh, I'm going to spend so much time scouting. No, you don't. You do need to look, don't sit and watch TV all day, but go and look at your plants and see if there's whitefly there. You don't need to try and name every whitefly in your crop, but he probably could because it'd only be one of them. So it's
a dumb question. Where do you get your tobacco plants from? And they live the life of the crop. And are they a pain in the house or not?
You almost don't need to buy them. Once you start putting a crop in and need a flower, you almost can't get rid of them. So you do it once and they are everywhere.
I'd say that we've said to a number of people that soon Clevedon is going to be completely covered in tobacco. Hence, there's going to be a lot of people that aren't happy with us.
So all the plants on the trial have come from us as virus free, but reputable source. I mean, we're very extensive in the big tobacco scene, so but that's obviously on Trade Me and stuff. Tobacco seeds are sold because it's such a lucrative home cash crop. But if you are looking at it, there's a lot of other steps. Don't just go and plant a whole bunch of tobacco without speaking to us, because if you don't have an account or I don't know who you are, you're not getting any Edgitatus and it's just going to take up space. But I think all of you guys there can source tobacco seeds as well, right? Maybe. Someone told me that you could.
Because there is a virus risk potentially of transfer from tobacco plant to tomato plant.
Yeah, so we are actually looking at some other host plants because, as Angela's put, tobacco is a bit of a pest, and when those seeds drop, they are going to be coming up for your great-great-grandchildren to keep plucking them out of the ground. Whereas other plants like mullein are much slower growing and only flower in the second year, might be a much wiser choice. And that's what's actually recommended over in North America and Europe.
Herman, you don't think so? Oh, okay. Easy to put him a weed as well.
As well? Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, same as tobacco. Yeah.
As we learn these things, we'll share more.
And one of the great things about this trial is that growers are already committing and entering into the biological space before the finish of the program, which isn't without its challenges, I suppose.
Yeah, one of the things that I think's great, and I've actually said, I think since my beginnings of being involved in the industry, is if we come up with a good solution, you can charge what you want, because the growers will adopt it. You know, if it's economically viable for the growers, they will adopt what it is to take on board, because it makes good sense for their businesses. So really for us, I think we've identified some potential solutions. We just got to fine tune it as to show how it's going to be the most effective, both in doing the job, but also economically for our growers. Yeah.
James.
I think possibly a point that wasn't addressed. It's something that as seed suppliers, we always talk to growers about. And I know I've discussed it with Chris many, many times, is this stuff doesn't just sit on the shelf. So you've got to give the guys a forecast. Otherwise they won't have the bugs for you, and we won't have the seed for you either. So forecast, please.
Really good point.
Hello?
If there's no further questions, I've got a last one. Was there one down here? No?
Online, please.
Okay. Is there a consumer
Online, please.
market advantage? Is there a premium on tomatoes that are produced with biological spray-free? Are we at that space, or is that what consumers just expect these days?
Yeah, I actually, psychology, I'll just get you to answer that question.
Simon?
No, it's to what the supermarket expectation is. They want good, safe food.
Correct. There's no premium paid for the product, but they have very, very strict residue rules, and certainly using the biologicals keeps you well within those rules, and that's the payback. Without biologicals, you're having to heavily spray with chemicals that have basically lost their efficacy, and the people are using more and more of them, and they're drifting into off-label stuff. And Chris's answer earlier was exactly the answer I was looking for. The half-life of some of these chemicals is frightening. And you front up to a supermarket with product that's been doused in one of those nasties, and if you're caught, you will get shut down and your crop will be destroyed.
Sorry, just one last comment
Thanks,
for me
Simon.
is please access and take advantage of the resources that are being produced. I know some of the grower IPM guidelines are available here today, and we've got a range of these videos up on the Tomatoes New Zealand and the ALT YouTube channels. Have a look at them, and I'm sure everybody will learn something. Thank you.
As we are running ahead of time, we have queued up another of those videos if we would like to see the Nkasi one. I can't remember.
We have a new star.
Yeah, let's get the video organised, and let's also thank our panel and Lex for the presentation.
Won't be a moment.
So after the video, we'll have a break, and then our next speaker's coming in from Holland, I think. So at 4 o'clock?
4 o'clock.
Yeah. So we'll have a networking time, a break, have a cup of tea, have something to eat, and then we'll come back at 4 o'clock. That's going to be a really important one. It's going to cover the hygiene issues that we've talked about earlier today. So we can do everything right, whether it's with the seeds we get or whether it's with the biologicals we use, but hygiene, absolutely critical for our houses going forward and into the future. So hopefully we're not far away. Here we are in Cassia.
Hello, I'm Dave. Today I'll guide you through the process of using Encasia famosa, tiny parasitic wasp that target whitefly nymphs for effective whitefly control as part of an integrated pest management system. These cards contain Encasia eggs and they come in a few sizes. The standard is 100 eggs. We hung the Encasia cards on the plants out of the sun, roughly halfway up the plant. Your whitefly population will determine how many cards you need. I recommend you distribute them evenly throughout the glasshouse. Our goal is to introduce 1 Encasia per square meter, multiplied by the average number of whiteflies per plant. This approach helps us achieve a favorable pest per predator ratio for control. It is important to monitor the rate of parasitism. We do this by determining the percentage of black scale under the leaves. The black scale has been parasitized and we like to see at least 80% parasitism. We find these lower in the plant. Remember, the whitefly life cycle is about 4 weeks, so we won't be finding evidence of parasitism in the heads. When you de-leaf after introducing Encasia, it's a good idea to keep some leaves in the glasshouse for an extra 1 to 2 weeks. This allows us to check for Encasia parasitism and ensure that our control measures are working effectively. I even encourage you to drop the leaves on the ground so the Encasia have a chance to emerge rather than discarding them. With IPM, using predators early is critical to success. It's easier to kill 1 whitefly than a million. I recommend you introduce 3 Encasia per square meter every week after planting and increase the cards as soon as you start seeing whitefly. The predators killing the whitefly you never see are your best crop protection investment. An IPM program built around early and regular Encasia introductions coupled with effective scouting can control whitefly populations in the glasshouse, providing a clean crop and higher production. For more IPM tips, check out the other videos in this series.
Before we do just break for a drink, there were actually a couple of questions online that I've managed to miss. I don't know if maybe Lex and Chris might be able to address these. Somebody's asked, has anybody checked the mature tobacco plants in the glasshouse for viruses? They may be good trap plants for you to check what viruses you have in the glasshouse. Oh.
We haven't checked them for virus. They're not in any of the trial houses that we have them in. They don't appear to have any virus symptoms. Yeah, although they're in the Solanaceous family, yeah, I'm not sure if we should be checking them for other things, but
I think the opportunity's there. So tobacco plants are often used as a trap plant in quarantine houses. And so if there is viruses there, they could get transferred to the tobacco plant. So it's something to think about, I think, going forward, that potentially it could be an opportunity, not only for hosting your beneficials, but also for monitoring whether there's any viruses present or not.
Yeah, generally the tobacco plant is a good monitor and it will show you the symptoms quite easily. won't show you the symptoms straight away. But in general, if you've got a virus in tobacco, you'll see it. You'll be able to determine it.
Yeah, we have flagged it as a potential issue. But at the moment, it's the best option that we've got. We're trialing it the way we are, but as I say, there is some mullein being tested, but if it turns out that it's potentially a worse problem, but we'll look for other things. Yeah.
Second question.
Oh, it's related. It was just asking what the host range for the Ingentatus is, because maybe there is another option out there that we're not aware of.
Yeah, I mean, there are other host plants, like mullein has been flagged up as a good one in Europe and North America, and that's why we're looking at that. It's, as one grower might say, is painfully slow growing, but at least it seems unlikely that it's going to drop a whole bunch of seeds in his glasshouse this year. So that is definitely a bonus.
Okay, let's have that break and I'll yell out when we're ready to start our next session. So thanks once again, guys.